Right, now I've been umming and ahhing whether or not to make this into a video, and given I finished up slightly early this week, I figured, why not? Because I've been back on eBay, and this arrived very speedily because I ordered a high-end AMD gaming bundle for just £12 off eBay. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet, because I want to see if anyone can guess what I've ordered, because this is for future projects, rather than what it actually is as a whole bundle. At the same time, I'm not 100% sure what we're getting because it was quite a basic listing. I just know that I bid £12, won it, and it arrived before the end of the week. So why don't we get this thing open? Weird. We're in. And they've even got the top of a box of what it once was. Right, let me get all of this out. Well, I wasn't too sure if it would be in box or not, but we have the top of the box it was in, and this is actually a high-end socket FM2 motherboard. I really want to test more FM2. It was great testing the last one. Unfortunately, my equipment for it is just stuff we've got from cheap bundles, so I thought, why don't we buy a slightly better bundle? And inside this we've got quick install guide. Oh, it has some notes. Oh, it's their old PC specs. They went with a HD 7750, 58GB, so a 60GB SSD, DVD drive, 1TB storage, another 8GB partition, and then an external 1TB drive. And then for the rest of it, they've gone with the AMD A8 5600 and DDR3 RAM. Is there anything else? Windows 8.1 64-bit. Oh, we've got to try that disc. Oh, this is fantastic. Oh, that's so authentic, because this is what I was on about. That is reminiscent of what someone would be building here. But instead they've gone with a rather nice Asrock motherboard. I don't often buy Asrock, but there's a reason for it. So for £12, we have actually got CPU cooler. We've got 8 gigs of DDR3 Patriot RAM, and the part that I bought it for, the motherboard itself, because this is an FM2 Pro 4 board, which has, and trust me, I've been looking, it's a bit difficult to get them like this, 8-pin CPU power for overclocking, and actually better VRMs. FM2 was a budget socket, so coming across an actual nice board, which has, you know, power buttons, it has a code light. I mean, I couldn't really miss up the opportunity. Oh, I love that. I love how authentic this is. I guarantee they loved this system. The old 7750 plus AMD quad core, that's what I did back then. Admittedly, I went with AMD FX, which was a better idea. But if you do look at our two boards side by side, this is what we got as part of a £3 bundle. This is what you get when you buy a £12 bundle, which, you know, it's not a great deal more money, but it is 4 times the price we paid for this. I mean, look at the quality difference in the boards. This is why I wanted an FM2 decent board for testing, because this was fun, and it's quite reminiscent of what most people went with, but it's not going to cut it for the higher end stuff that everyone's asking to see, so that's why I've gone and bought this one. We are just going to make sure it turns on, and then we are going to probably keep this set up with the A8. It's quite reminiscent of what we actually just used in my dedicated hour-long video, but we can actually see if overclocking it on a proper board gives us any performance benefits. As I said, it's a bit of a weird video, this one, but it's one that I thought, you know what, I've got the time, and given how authentic this showed up, I'm glad I did decide to film it. It's not every day you get someone's 2012 budget build through in the back of their own manual. So given this is relatively high-end, we should just be able to push this on button. It's turned on, and hopefully it just straight up works and posts. Works straight out the box. It's got 8 gigs of RAM with half a gig assigned to the iGPU. It is the A8 5600K, so the same chip we looked at earlier. I probably own this chip in like 3 different variants now. This is what I mean when I say it is the most common AMD A8. So many of the bundles you come across, and so many people that built cheap computers with it, used it like this. Hopefully he wasn't running it in single channel, because, well, the setup as it is running single channel. But I do want to put on a better cooler, because, I mean, the whole point of this is I want to actually try and overclock the A8 as far as it'll go as a test of this board, and to see if there's any extra performance on hand when we don't use, well, crap tier components. And I think this cooler's worse than the one we were using last time. Is it just a straight aluminium block? It's just straight aluminium block with no thermal paste actually left on it. After 10 years, this thermal paste is coming to its end, so I am going to be replacing it. This should actually bolt down on top. Oh, this is beautifully overkill. That is wonderful, that is. This, I don't even know what to do with. This is pretty much what you got with FM2. So in our last video, I used a 939 cooler with a copper slug running through it, but your average FM2 setup came with one of these, which I really would not advocate overclocking on, and likely is the reason why this has probably been at stock clocks its entire life. So who knows, maybe this sample will go further. It's sort of one of my plans for this year, is as I test socket by socket, I do want to build overkill setups for each of the different sockets, just so it's easier for me when it comes to testing, because having everything all set up and just digging out a computer is much less time consuming than building an entire setup and then troubleshooting it and hoping it's all survived. And this board even has a clear CMOS battery for when you are overclocking. So yeah, there we go, we've got the setup, the A8 5600K, same chip we looked at last time, but now running on the Asrock FM2A75 Pro 4. I mean, the buy it now prices, people are asking 25, 40, 60, 30. They didn't give it many updates. So this is one from a member's video, one of them about £1 USB sticks from China. But you can get small capacity ones, so I think this is just an old school 2GB stick, which I've bought for original Xbox mods, and of course BIOS flashing, so not exactly particularly exciting, but... So I was thinking today, there's a couple of things I want to test. One, does overclocking on a high-end motherboard actually do anything? Can we run it with Crossfire, because these actually do support dual Crossfire? 3, overclocking the iGPU a little bit, and then 4, just follow me along for the testing and the adventure. It's a very stupid looking BIOS, but hey, I'm not arguing with the fact that we get a lot of options in here. Sound effects enabled. I've never really used Asrock boards before. I've heard good things, but it's just one of them boards where everyone sort of finds one they've had good experiences with. For me personally, I've been using Asus boards in most of my newer built computers since 2013, and then before that, when I'm building computers for the channel, the boards I've had the most success with have always been Asus boards. But given that no higher-end Asus boards have come up for sale, I thought, why don't we try an Asrock one? And so far, it's been lovely, to be honest. I probably shouldn't be prodding around while it's updating the BIOS, but hopefully this won't fail, and this will all go swimmingly well. Also worth noting here that, for a value prospect, this setup cost us £12. So, as much as I'm excited for this for being high-end and a bit of a continuation, this in itself is actually a budget build video that's actually focused on budget. Because it's £12. You literally get this much power for 12 quid these days. Yeah, it's FM2. Yeah, FM2 kind of sucks. But, hey, you can be into the high-end territory of it for next to nothing. I mean, it's not exactly a great score, but hey, it's better than what we were getting on a lower end board. First of all, faster RAM in dual channel. So included as part of our 12 quid bundle, we did actually get some extra nipper RAM. I was going to put in my own nipper RAM, but we actually already get some. This one's red, but these are only 4GB sticks, so we're just going to whack in my 8GB sticks. These sell for a bit of money because they clock surprisingly high, but I've put in some better RAM, and what we're going to do is increase the RAM speed and then overclock this as high as it will go. But one advantage on a lot of these boards is you get a choice between AMD AMP or Intel XMP, so just run Intel XMP, it is a lot better. But I am going to try and see if this will do 5 GHz off the bat. I mean, I don't really care about cooking this processor because, as I said, I've got so many more of them on hand, and one of the reasons we're doing this is to have the higher end board that lets us do stupid stuff like this. So we're going to disable all of the advanced modes, double check all of these are set right. Let's give that a go now. So I am running it with quite a high voltage, but then again, so we'll see if it's stable at about 1.5 volts. That is high, but at the same time, nothing that AMD's own software won't try and do. I don't think there's any dice on that one. This might not be a very good processor. Try again. Well, this board is lovely for overclocking. I mean, it's not exactly the highest end board, but it's higher end than most FM2. But this CPU is cooked, genuinely. It's just going to need more voltage shoved into it, I guess. But it's not happy, I'll say that much. I'm assuming it spent most of its life overheating on this crappy aluminium cooler, and it's just doesn't like budging. If we can hit a stable 4.5 GHz at semi-okay voltages, we'll see if it returns a better score by the fact that the board is actually decent. I mean, I haven't actually seen it boot to Windows with an overclock yet, because this processor's kind of bad. But I was kind of hoping that we could just cook this one. But it appears that someone's already beaten me to it. Same voltages as AMD's own overclocking software, which they may have actually used. AMD did pretty much say, use Overdrive and get more performance. And as we've seen, it will just cook a processor. There we go. It just, yeah, this CPU is so cooked. Let's see if it can do CPU-Z. No. No, it can't. It can't. Of course it can't. No, this one is really buggered. I can't give it any more bloody voltage. Give it 1.5 volt and see if it'll boot at 4.5 gigahertz. It should not need that much voltage, 4.5 gigahertz. It's not happy about it though. Right, I wonder what AMD's own crappy software will do, because this A8 is completely buggered, but I am curious what it might do if we just let AMD's awful software take over. Right, let AMD install their software and we'll see what kind of overclock it comes up with, because maybe on a better board, AMD Overdrive might work, but I'm highly suspicious that that might be the reason we're in this mess in the first place. So I've reset everything because it was stable at 4.5 gigahertz, but we needed an obscene amount of voltage to do it. I'm guessing that's because the processor in here is just cooked though, but we're going to see what AMD says, because why not? I mean, it's got everything it needs. It's got a pretty overbuilt cooler, we've got airflow on there, we've got everything it needs, even a decently high-end board. Now, it's not exactly the peak of FM2 boards, but hey, it's better than the average one you'll find on eBay. So if we just click yes, I'm not exactly the biggest fan of using this, but at least it will give us some sort of indication of how actually cooked this AMD A8 is. So I will bring up a few metrics. Right, we'll let it run and we'll see what it does. I want to say it'll probably get to about 4.5 and then stop, because that's about what we were able to do manually. I'd imagine that my knowledge on overclocking, which is pretty basic but still good enough, is probably a bit more in-depth than this is. It's taken a while. It's managed to get to 4.2 gigahertz. Keep in mind, this awful little MSI board and that A8 that's on there was able to do 4.8 gigahertz somewhat stable through this. It was a terrible overclock, but yeah, I don't think the board's the problem here. It's still going, somehow. I don't think this will actually be stable in real usage, but it is hitting 4.9 gigahertz through AMD's Overdrive software. So unless I was doing something wrong, or the BIOS on this board is just balked and it's not like I'm used to, no clue. Because it wouldn't do this via the BIOS's own settings. I have no clue what's happening here, because apparently it's now running at 5.7 gigahertz. What does this software know that we don't? Well, it completed and took a long time to do, and as you can now see here, this cannot be accurate at all. 6.3 gigahertz, according to AMD Overdrive. I don't know how AMD Overdrive reports its clock speed, because on the FX series, relatively accurate, it'll usually bring them up to 4.5 gigahertz on OK cooling, and maybe 4.6, 4.7 if you've got a good board and a good cooler. On these Athlon and AMD A8 chips, anything from the FM2 sockets, I think it just makes it up, but it means you can get supposedly insane overclocks without doing anything. No, it's not blue screening, it's just struggling to do anything. The system does not feel right at all with these settings, and I have no idea how it's managed this. This seems like a terrible idea, but I am going to get a score. I have a feeling that given how poorly the system is running in the background, it is going to do downright abysmally, but we'll wait and see. I don't think this is running at any sort of clock speed it's claiming to. I think this processor is probably well and truly dead, at least when it comes to clock speed, but hey, I wonder what it's going to actually report at the end of this. I don't think if we go off these numbers here, which are probably the most accurate, this is doing anything. I have no idea how this is messed up so bad that it thinks it's running at 6.3 gigahertz and in reality is running at half that. So yeah, Overdrive here, a bit of a mistake. Rather than faffing about anymore, it's easier for me to swap to my spare AMD A8. I really don't care about these processors. They are so cheap that we'll just use the one that we know can overclock a little bit that we used last time. Well, after changing over to another AMD A8, which is the one we were testing originally, we've been able to get 4.9 GHz stable out of it, which is good enough. I mean, it's not exactly the most amazing overclock, because I was constantly trying to get 5 GHz, but even with this board, we just can't do it. I've run it for a few synthetic benchmarks, and my big takeaway from all of this is having a better board gets us better performance. Whereas as soon as you go over 4.5 GHz, you're going to be drawing enough power that you do just want a better board. And this one's nothing fantastic, but it's a lot better than our old MSI one was. So why don't we launch up something like GTA 5 and find out if this overclock now means 60 FPS across the board. It's an AMD A8. It's probably going to make no difference. I've spent too long trying to overclock this, but it does mean I've learnt a few things, such as AMD Overdrive seems to work fine up to about 4.3 to 4.5 GHz, and then after that it just sort of makes up its own nonsense and performs worse than just stock settings. And if you are going to overclock these past 4.5 GHz, I mean, if you're going to overclock them at all, just do it through the board. But also, yeah, make sure you haven't got a processor that's completely fried, because this one, well, it's just not stable at all. I mean, we got it for free with the board, so I'm not that fussed. But this one was just a nightmare. It just doesn't budge at all. Whereas that one's happy to do 5 GHz for a couple of seconds and 4.9 GHz completely stable on a £12 Asrock motherboard. So we're running the exact same setup, other than the motherboard, and with a better setup overclock. We've still got the R9 Nano down there, and we are now in GTA 5. And now, with normal settings in the Enhanced Edition, we are staying somewhat closer to 60 FPS a lot of the time. And it's just taken an overclock to just shy of 5 GHz done properly on a slightly better motherboard to get to this point. I still don't think it'll be able to do a consistent 60 FPS, because I'd imagine once we start moving a bit quicker we'll start hovering around the mid-40s again, but it does appear that it's now hovering in and around the high 40s, rather than between 30 to 40-ish FPS. So you know what? Actually quite a stark improvement by investing in a better motherboard. Is it good? No. Has it crashed? No, it hasn't crashed. It was just loading. It did that last time in the exact same spot. I don't know what it is. For some reason the AMD A8 just hates loading this bit of grass. But you know what? That is a sizable uplift in performance. The thing is though, it's not exactly really going to change the overall picture of the AMD A8 as a processor. I suppose the one thing I am curious about with an overclock is, can it maybe launch new games now? We couldn't get it to launch anything relatively new, not because instruction sets, but just because it refused. So I'm wondering if we try and launch Arc Raiders, I'll let it do its update first, and then we'll see if maybe it can get any extra performance. So, we'll take a little look. I have absolutely no clue, but it has started. It has taken about 45 minutes to get to the home screen, but at least it's done it this time. It used to just time out because it was just so slow before. The game would go to load, fail to load its own anti-cheat, and would then just cancel launching. But it has managed to get in-game. It's hovering around 40 FPS on the start screen, now 20 FPS. I thought it had already done this, because it had taken 45 minutes, but maybe? Right, let's find out what happens when we go in-game. Okay, it has made it in-game, sort of. It's required an overclock to get in-game, which is surprising. And we are getting 30-ish FPS. Nothing's loading in quite right. What if we cap our frame rate down to 30? Just give it a little bit of a chance to reduce what it's having to do. I mean, it's taken an overclock near 5 GHz for FM2 to actually be able to get into a modern game. We were not able to do this in our last video. Yeah, this is not great, but it is controllable. The R9 Nano is, of course, doing nothing here. It's not even warm. It is achieving in and around 30-ish FPS. I mean, it's closer to the mid-20s a lot of the time, especially when there's smoke effects going on, bits and pieces like that. But you know what? I'm going to call that a little bit of a success here. FM2 is still hot garbage, but if you buy yourself a slightly better board, well, you can at least open modern titles at nearly 30-ish FPS. You're going to have to run them on the edge of what they are actually capable of doing. Mine can't do quite 5 GHz for very long, but it can do 4.9, and that is good enough to get in-game. I don't really know what else we can say about that. I've run the synthetics, I've run the modern games, we've seen what it can do. I doubt it will change performance too much in any of the other titles we've benchmarked. We've actually gone and improved FM2 to the stage where it can launch modern games. Kinda. I suppose one of the other main advantages of FM2 is you do have the APU. But let's be honest, we've already pretty much looked at it to death in the last video. But it did have one last hidden trick up its sleeve, and now we've actually got a more competent setup together. I actually have a HD 6670, and according to AMD, if I plug this in, then this and our iGPU will work together in Crossfire. I've never once tried this, at least not properly. I've used it in laptops before and it was a terrible experience, but just so we don't have to revisit the A8 ever again, let's get this last bit out of the way. So according to AMD, we just unplug our actual graphics card, and we take what is a rather mediocre terascale based graphics card and plonk that in instead. And then when we install drivers, it should all just work. I am going to reset the BIOS back to defaults because the overclock will not be benefiting us at all here. When you start overclocking these up to the level we were at, the iGPU suffers greatly because of it. I don't know if it's installing drivers all of a sudden, and that's why the screen's gone black, and it has installed Catalyst Control Center. All of this without me asking. I've just run DDU and removed all drivers from the system, which included the Catalyst drivers. I mean, this is one of the few instances where the beta Terascale drivers do sometimes work a bit better with Crossfire. At the moment, it is disabled. Okay, so we have got a window pop up. Radeon Dual Graphics, a multi-GPU performance open gaming platform that will offer you the ultimate gaming experience. This is apparently set up and working. Who knows, maybe this is actually a smoother experience than I thought. So in 3D Mark, it has detected our 6670, it's detected our 7560D, which is built in. I've not messed around with the VRAM configurations at all, because what I will do is bring our iGPU up to a full 1GB. I'm not too sure how much of a difference it really makes, because Windows is pretty good about allocating it, as are these motherboards. Generally, I've not noticed any real performance difference, but why don't we see what happens if we run 3D Mark. Okay, it is actually utilizing both cards. I mean, our frame rate is all over the place. Frame pacing is horribly broken. Maybe adjusting a few bits in the BIOS will fix that. Well, we're about to get a score. Legendary. I have no clue if that's because no one's ever done it. No, there is an average score. 992. Someone has done this before. Well, that's something. Why don't we increase our VRAM limit and see if it goes up again. Shared onboard memory, if we set that to 1GB. So we'll give that another go, see if it's improved anything somewhat. Well, changing the VRAM, there's not really any point going over it because it didn't really offer us any real performance change. We might as well get away with doing a few benchmarks here. One thing I was very curious about was GTA 5, because on the stock iGPU, you can do about 720p, 30fps, and generally get a very Xbox 360 style experience. I mean, I'd probably rather play it on an Xbox 360, but hey, that was kind of the point of these APUs. Did I see myself testing Crossfire today? Probably not, but it's the way things go. This is not exactly great by any stretch of the imagination, but it is utilizing both cards to return us 30-ish FPS. Kind of what it already did on the iGPU? Yeah, it is using the 6670, that's getting warm, and both cards are reporting usage. Maybe it just isn't that great of a solution. I mean, as I was saying, one of the best ways of using Terascale as a dual graphics card setup are the beta drivers, so I can go ahead and get them installed, but maybe this just isn't worth it. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and install some extra drivers, and I'm sure we will try and benchmark the abomination that is AMD hybrid graphics, because why not? So just to recap a couple of things, we've ordered a cheap £12 high-end AMD bundle, and we have managed to get the processor running at just shy of 5GHz. Now, I did do a little bit of synthetic testing to show you what this means, and really all it means is when you start getting into these higher clocks above 4.5GHz, where older boards or cheaper boards may sort of start faltering with voltages and you end up with a score that's pretty much flatlined, you do actually see an increase in performance. Is it enough to make FM2 good? Well, on this AMD A8, not really at all. But the reason I bought this board is at least we can push chips to their limits now, so I suppose that is something it's got going for it. In terms of value of the bundle that we've got here, well, we already reviewed this processor quite in depth about 2 videos ago. It's a full hour-long video on the AMD A8 with comprehensive, extensive testing across multiple operating systems, including the APU being tested, and really there's no point recapping that again today.
So at least we know we can overclock now, but the reason I bought this bundle isn't for the value of the parts, because I already knew how they'd perform, and you can go and watch that if you want, but we now have a decent board for overclocking and extra bits on. The other advantage of this board is it should work slightly better for hybrid multi-GPU, or whatever AMD calls it. Long story short, what it does is it uses the APU's graphics, in this case a Terascale 3 based chip, you add in another Terascale 3 based card, in our case a HD 6670, and then it will use Crossfire to communicate across both cards and give you double the performance. Now, according to most people online, and according to my own experiences, the Terascale implementation of this is pretty poor. Now, there are drivers for this from Windows XP up to Windows 10, which is what we're running today, but support seems to work best on Windows 7 and Windows Vista, at least from the reading I've been doing online. That still doesn't change the fact that this technology, it got better with AMD's GCN, but I don't think it's going to work well today. We've already seen briefly that it'll load GTA 5 and it will implement itself, but it didn't seem to work very well. But what I've gone through and done is I've set up the system, I've tuned it all properly for this, I've installed the latest AMD beta drivers, which, to be fair, on Terascale do tend to work better for Crossfire, and it is showing up as a linked GPU. That's how it refers to itself in the drivers. So I suppose to round this video off a little bit, we know the board works, we know everything else works, we know how the process is going to perform, but the only thing we didn't bother testing was hybrid multi-GPU. So here we are, and let's find out how this abomination of a setup actually works with a very small version of the benchmarks. Starting off the benchmarks, we have GTA 5 Legacy Edition, running with normal settings and soft shadows, as that's how we ran it on just the APU by itself. And how is performance now? We've got an add-in graphics card, which is working in tandem. Well, it's actually pretty poor, and I have a few theories why. Well, when we're testing this on the AMD A8, even with an overclock, it does struggle to break 40 to 60 FPS even when not much is going on. So introducing the extra overhead of having to deal with Crossfire here, well, we just end up with performance that's worse than just running either a single graphics card by itself or just the APU by itself. No, there was no amount of tweaking or anything like that we could do could actually bring this to a playable level. It would run at a 27 FPS average, with horrible Crossfire-induced frame pacing bring it down to 1% lows of 15 FPS. So, starting off with GTA 5, which, to be fair, is usually quite a good Crossfire test, I don't think it's so much the technology that's limiting us here, but rather the fact that this processor hardly has enough power to keep up with its own iGPU, and by implementing more power with extra overheads, it just makes things worse. So yeah, a bit of a fail here, but you never know. Next up we have Counter-Strike Go, which does actually support Crossfire being based on the Source engine, and some people did used to run it with Crossfire back in the day. When people started getting properly competitive, they realised that frame pacing actually mattered, and it quickly fell out of popularity. But for a brief moment of its life, there were people running this game with SLI and Crossfire, and given this is a cheap low-end solution from back in the day, it should run it fine. Now, according to Hardware Monitor, our APU was actually seeing utilization, but according to the game and the MSI Afterburner overlay, we were just seeing the performance of the HD 6670, which is sort of something I'd be inclined to believe, because I can honestly think a Terascale 3 based dedicated card, it should be able to run this game at over 100 FPS in 720p, and that's exactly what we were getting here. The only thing that actual multi-GPU was doing here was setting off VAC anti-cheat, so we couldn't actually start CSGO with any form of anti-cheat while it was enabled. You could go through and disable it and see pretty much the same performance, but then it would also, I don't even know, it's got me stumped, because it should work here, but it seems to be the only thing it's actually doing is triggering VAC. So CSGO apparently is working, but the only way it's working is to make the game worse for you by only allowing you in non-VAC servers. There was one bit of success though. Mountain Blade Bannerlord we've seen is a DirectX 11 title, and it's a rather well optimised one, so despite having absolutely no driver-side support for it, it does actually work with Crossfire here. Now, it wasn't a spectacularly great experience, but given this is quite a recent title running on a very bodged solution on a modern operating system on what is an APU and dedicated GPU hybrid setup, I was amazed to actually see any degree of scaling. We were seeing pretty much perfect utilization with not actually too bad frame times. Yes, the game did look pretty much downright hideous in 720p with very low settings, which is how it defaulted itself, but we did return 46 FPS on average, with 1% lows down to 31 FPS, which was one of the best experiences we saw, and it's honestly in a title I wasn't expecting to have any degree of support for it. So Mount & Blade Bannerlord once again proves itself as an incredibly well optimized title, given it can somehow understand this configuration. Now, from what I remember back in the day, the poster child for testing these setups was always Tomb Raider, because it does actually have really good scaling. And we were able to get in-game in a 1080p resolution, keep in mind, and we saw the game run at over 60 FPS with great scaling. But I don't know what's going on here, because it didn't matter which set of drivers I tried, it would either crash the game, and one instance it actually just opened the Tomb Raider YouTube channel in Internet Explorer, which is definitely a bug from the early Windows 7 days, and the other time, with the older drivers, it just rebooted the entire system. So Tomb Raider is a great proof of concept for all 3 seconds of gameplay you get, and then the game crashes or turns off your system. But finally, can it run Crysis? Despite being an older DirectX 10 based title, it does actually have good support for multi-graphics cards, both Nvidia and AMD. And even on this janky setup, we did actually see over 60 FPS. But there's no point really talking about this for very long because, well, it did the exact same thing as Tomb Raider. I tried the Final Catalyst drivers, I tried the Crimson drivers, and unfortunately they returned the same results and did the exact same thing. So Crysis could work, but I don't know what's really happening driver side, because something is definitely going on with the system, causing it to just completely bug out. So Crysis could work, but not for us today. So that was a very quick look at AMD's multi-GPU APU hybrid graphics thing, and honestly, in a couple of titles I can see the appeal. It's just a shame today the only one that actually showed any real benefit was Mount & Blade Bannerlord, because you think Tomb Raider and Crysis, which are sort of era appropriate, well, they should work well, and for the little brief glimpse of gameplay we got, well, they were running fine. But I don't know what's happening here, maybe we need to go back to an older operating system. The point of this video was never to actually show this off as a viable solution because, well, that ship has long since sailed, and to be fair, AMD does say Windows 10 is supported here. These are Windows 10 compatible drivers that we are running, and I've set them up all properly, and I've monitored it, I've made sure it's running, I've monitored the scaling, and it's just a shame that, well, the technology's kind of bad here. I know it gets better with GCN later on, but for those people that were asking, well, it's still the same experience you'd expect, where you could have a good opportunity if you get it to work. But then in newer titles like GTA 5, where you're already CPU bound with a dedicated card, well, just adding more overheads just renders you in, well, worse performance. So there we have it, my £12 high-end AMD bundle. And it's been fun. I mean, the main fun that I got out of this was overclocking it, which at least went to show that, you know what, if you buy one of these higher-end bundles and boards, well, you can eke out just enough power to make them slightly more viable. The thing is, you might be able to have the power to not time out launching modern games, but it doesn't mean they're going to suddenly be playable. For me, this is just a fun way of giving me some extra tweaking controls if we do go back and review more FM2 processors, but it's one of the reasons this has been a bit of a weird video. Usually when we get these cheap bundles, we try and push them as far as we can, but today there's no point because it came with the exact same processor that we've already pushed to its complete limits. And all this is a bit of a follow-up and a video that, well, I just thought I might as well make it because maybe some people will enjoy some overclocking action and to answer a few of those other questions people had in the previous video. So I hope you've enjoyed. There are plenty of more cheap PCs and bundles. I have got absolute oodles of posts that's arrived. I've got stuff from China, I've got stuff from eBay, I've picked up stuff from Facebook Marketplace, I've even got cheap computers from CEX. So there's plenty coming, but I just thought this was a video that maybe people would enjoy. So I hope you've enjoyed what is a slight follow-up, slight cheap bundle video. It's a bit of a random one, but I hope you've all enjoyed. Thank you very much for watching, and good night.